Hello and welcome to another episode of EPMS Tech Talk. I'm Joanne LaFlamme.
I'm Chris Costa.
So Chris, what would you like to talk about today?
Well, I thought maybe we could get into setting up a couple of pre-press processes.
Sure, that'd be great.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so how about we take a look at setting up maybe a design process. That might be the first kind of process you'd set up in your database.
Okay. Yeah, if we go through the logical step, yeah.
Sure,
okay.
Great. Well, let's take a look.
Good.
All right, so to set up your cost centers and processes, you need to be in the file maintenance module. So I'm going to go into file maintenance, and I'm going to go up to cost centers and select my cost center type of prepress. And I do have a cost center already set up for prepress. I'm going to modify that just to show you. I have started with a code of 1000. We do have a specific coding convention that we recommend. You'll find that in our help manuals. But typically prepress is in the 1000 range. I've given it a description. And there's a lot of information down here on the cost center, and this is all for scheduling purposes. So for really all you absolutely need to have on a cost center is the code and the description. So, and click OK. And once you have a cost center defined, you can add a process at the bottom. So I'm going to click on Add. And as we talked about, the first process we're going to set up is one for design. Now for design work, you could set it up multiple different ways. What I'm going to do here is, say my designers, when we estimate a job, we figure out a certain amount of time that they're going to be spending on the design. So I'm going to set this particular process up by time.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
So we'll call this process, or the process code for this will be, we'll say 1010. So that it will fall under the 1000 range, under that cost center. And we'll call this design. And we do have a size fields here, width and length, but I'm doing this by time, so it doesn't matter. I have 4 different costing methods here. In this case, for design work, when my estimator or my CSR selects this process in an estimator order, they're just going to estimate how many minutes it's going to take. So that's the costing method I'm going to use.
Okay.
So we'll select minutes. And now I have to put in my all-inclusive rate. What does this process cost me on an hourly rate? And this is my fully burdened rate, including labor and all of my overhead. So say this was $120 an hour. I'll enter that here. Now some of these fields, because I'm using minutes, don't need to apply. I don't need to put in any other rates. I don't need to put in a unit cost because I'm not costing by the unit. I can put in a minimum cost if I want to charge at least $10, say. So that way, if somebody puts in a time that we calculate less than $10, it will charge at least $10.
Right. Okay.
Okay. We'll go over some of these other fields as we work on other types of processes that we would need to use. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm just going to click on OK here. And my process for design work is saved.
Okay. So that's really the main, as far as the design process, that's probably the main thing. Just getting how much you want to charge per hour. And then on the estimate, they would just punch in how many minutes they want.
Exactly. Exactly. So let's take a look. Let's go create an estimate, and we'll just add design work into it.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
Okay, so let's go into estimating order entry. And I'm going to add, we'll go into estimates. And I'm going to add an estimate. And I'll just call this test estimate. And I will add a component. Select my sheet fed component. Copy my description over, and I'll put in a quantity of 1000. And so we're doing an 8.5 by 11. That's fine. We'll go over to the processes now. And you can see as I highlight prepress, I have my prepress cost center and I have my design work. I can click on add here. I can see here that the costing method is minutes. So I can say this particular project I'm working on, I think is going to take 25 minutes to design. I'm going to click OK. Now if I hit the calculate button at the bottom, I can see what this process is going to calculate. So it's going to take 25 minutes at a cost of $125 an hour. It's $50, which is almost a half of what it's going to cost. So it's going to basically do it number of minutes times whatever your hourly rate is.
Sure.
Okay.
So that quantity you enter is always correlating to the costing method.
Exactly.
If it was units, you enter how many you were doing.
Correct.
Stuff like that. Okay.
Right.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Okay.
So now let's take a look at a different type of process. We'll take a look at maybe pre-flighting. That might be by unit.
Sure.
Okay, so let me close here. And I'll save this estimate so we can go back and edit it later. And we'll go back into File Maintenance, Cost Centers, Prepress, And now I'm going to add another one under Prepress. And we'll call this one 1020 is the code, and we'll call this PreFlight. Now this is something I may want to charge per file. So if I'm going to do it as a amount per file, I can do a cost per unit. Again, you still want to put in your hourly rate, because for job costing purposes, you may want to track it by hour. But now I can put in a unit cost. Maybe I want to charge $15 per hour for this process. Another thing I might want to do here is maybe this particular process I want to mark up separately than I do everything else in my database. You also, on any process, can put in a markup separately.
Sure.
And say, maybe I want to mark this up higher than I normally, if I normally mark up things maybe 20 or 30%, I want to mark this up 40. So I'm going to put in 40%. So we'll take a look at that as well. Okay, and that's all I need to fill out in here. I can click OK. And let's close here and test it out. So I'll go back into my estimate. Find the estimate I was working on. And I'll edit that. And we'll go over to the Processes tab. And now we'll select Preflighting. And as you said earlier, now I got to look at this. The cost is, it's a cost per unit. So now I know my quantity is in units. And maybe I'm doing 2 files. I click OK. And I'll hit the Calculate button here. And you'll see it was $15 per unit, so I have a cost of $30. But it was marked up at 40%, so that brought me to my $42.
Okay. Okay, good. And I also noticed there was a cost grid, right? If I want to say one is one rate, but maybe if I'm doing 10 or 100, it's going to be a different rate.
Exactly, you can
set
do,
that up.
exactly. Like we have a cost of $15 in there. Maybe if it's 10 or more, I want to charge $12.
Yeah.
I can use that cost grid instead, and then there's a checkbox that says to use the cost grid, and it will
Okay.
use the grid instead of the individual
Sure.
unit cost.
Okay, that makes sense.
Great.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions?
No, I think that was good.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us for another episode of EPMS Tech Talk. I'm Joanne LaFlamme.
I'm Chris Costa.
Please look forward for more to come.